I think someone just joined into my class. Yes, sir.
Shawn, I'm going to hand it right over to you now.
All right, perfect, thanks. Yeah, like Mr. Lloyd said, I'm Shawn, I'm from Gould Lake, and there's a few Gould Lakers hanging out here too. You see some extra faces around. Usually, you guys probably haven't had a chance to come out to Gould Lake before, but usually classes come out and we go for hikes and things, but we can't do that now. So what I'm hoping to do is take you guys on a bit of a virtual hike, if we can go for a little bit of walk that way. So what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about some nature stuff. I have a few things here that I can show and tell, and we can maybe discuss as well. And then maybe we can kind of slip out for a virtual hike and see what's in the woods. Okay. And then afterwards, if you guys have any stories or if you guys have any things you want to talk about or questions, that would be great too. We can answer some questions and things. Okay, so I'll get right into it. Some of these things you're going to know right away when I hold them up, and some of them might be brand new to you. But maybe if you know what it is, just give me a thumbs up. Okay, I'll start off with a tricky one. So hopefully you can see this little guy right here. This is the skull of an animal that we found in the woods. Anybody thumbs up? They know what it might be. A thumb down. Okay. Well, I'll give you a couple of clues. When we find things like this, there's usually a few clues we can figure out about the animals. One is by looking at their teeth. We can kind of figure out what they like to eat. And if I look at this animal, it's got these really, really sharp front teeth right here. And it's also got really, really sharp back teeth too. They don't look like ours. So this animal's teeth are actually made for eating other animals, which seems kind of mean at first, but really that's just how they do their grocery shopping. But the cool thing about it is that their back teeth, because they're so sharp and pointy, lets this animal not waste anything. It can crunch up bones and hair and everything. So it doesn't just pick out like a cheeseburger or a steak off of an animal. It just like eats the whole thing. All right, and this is from a raccoon. A neat little skull. Okay. This is another one. I find when I talk about this stuff, a lot of the time I say, ooh, this is my favorite, but I think maybe they're all my favorites. That's what I'm figuring out. So I'll put this one together a little bit. Okay, so obviously, thumbs up on this one. Do we know what it is? Yeah, we have some guesses for sure. Yeah, thumbs up, right? It's definitely a chipmunk. No, not a chipmunk. Okay, so this is from a deer, and this is a male deer. It still has the antlers on it. Okay. Deer like to lose their antlers, so every year they grow antlers, and then every year, sort of around this time, between now and like Valentine's Day, their antlers will break off and they'll fall in the woods. So sometimes it's fun to go looking for them. We call them sheds. Okay, but this is a deer skull. And if I look at its teeth with you, I don't know if we know what deer eat, but if you can see these teeth, they don't really look very much like ours, do they? So these teeth here are nice and flat, and they're actually really, really good if you are an animal that likes to eat twigs. So if you like to eat branches and that kind of stuff, then these are the teeth you need right here. They're good for grinding them up. And then I don't know if you can see these front teeth. These ones do look a little bit like our front teeth. These are what a deer would use for like nipping those little branches off so that it can get them. If you're out walking in the woods and you see lots of branches and they're missing the buds at the end of all the little shrubs, then there's a good chance that a deer came through and nipped those off. Okay. All right, so that's a deer. Another one we have here is a coyote. Okay, so coyote teeth and missing a few teeth. Okay, it didn't make it, but it's got those big sharp back teeth for grinding up bones as well. And then sometimes these front teeth look kind of scary, but really an animal like this just uses them the same way that we would use like a knife and a fork to get our food into smaller bites, right? So that's what it uses those for. It doesn't have teeth for like nipping off branches and things. It doesn't really need those. It's a good coyote impression going on there. Okay, and then here's another one of my favorites. So see if we can figure out what this one is. All right, it's pretty big. Its head is like actually almost the size of mine. Okay. And sometimes people guess some pretty crazy things about this one. They guess like dinosaur, or they guess alligator. Okay, but it's not those ones. This one would have like lots and lots and lots of fur. And then this time of year, probably this one's having a big nap right now. It's probably sleeping for the winter. Any thumbs up on it? Anyone know what it might be? Yeah, a couple thumbs up. So this one is a bear. This is from a black bear. Okay, and again, it's got those big teeth, right? So that it can tear up its food and get it into smaller bites. And it's also got some teeth, kind of like the deer, where it can pull apart branches and plants and things like that too. This animal is an omnivore. It likes to eat both plants and animals. So it's got teeth for that. If I have a look at its back teeth, I think I can show you here. Its back teeth actually look a lot like ours. They may be bigger, but they look a lot like ours, these ones here. So they actually work the same way as ours. They're good for grinding up plants, and they're also good for eating meat. Okay? They're also really big too, so you can trick the tooth fairy with them if you're sneaky that way. Probably not really though. Okay. So those are some of my favorite animals that I wanted to show you. Are you guys ready to go on a little hike? Thumbs up, yeah? Still with me? Okay, good. What we'll do for you guys, it'll be inside, obviously, so you won't need to actually go outside and hike. But I think I can take you along with me on a hike, okay? If you guys want to get ready with me, we can do that as well. Like, first, obviously, if you're going outside, you're going to need to put on like your imaginary toque, okay? So you don't need a real toque, but if you guys want to put on your imaginary one, that'd be good. And then you're going to want to get your coat on too. Mr. Lloyd's got his toque on. He's got his coat on. And it's kind of chilly out there. So I think you're going to want some big, big mitts too. Okay. I've got mine here. Okay. And then we'll see if we can take you with me here. If I go here. Right. We're going to go for a little hike and see what we see. There's actually a really good spot that we're going to go where there doesn't seem to be a lot of people. So there's lots and lots of animals around for us to see. So follow me and we'll have a look, see if we can find some tracks, maybe even see some animals. Okay, should be a really fun time. So one of the coolest things I find about tracking isn't being able to just tell what one track is, but actually being able to look and figure out what an animal's doing. When I started out, I was more interested in just like figuring out like, oh, that's a deer track, or oh, that's a coyote track. But then as I got into it, I found it was a lot more interesting to follow tracks for a little bit, and you can kind of see how that animal's behaving. So if you're following squirrel tracks, you can see what trees the squirrels are going up, or what they're going under, or where they're hiding. Or if you follow the deer tracks, you can look at when the tracks get close together or further apart, or if the hooves are spread out so they're running, so you can actually tell how an animal's behaving. Okay, we found something interesting here. This little thing here, I'm going to pick it up. Don't be too grossed out. This little ball of sawdust here is, some of you have probably already figured out, is not a Cocoa Puff. It's rabbit poop. So, or scientifically speaking, we call it rabbit scat. I'm just going to leave it here on the ground. Kind of a couple cool things about rabbit scat is that they have this this gross winter survival trick. So some animals will chew their food and then they'll redigest it. So that's what a deer will do. It'll eat a bunch of twigs and swallow them down and then kind of digest it. And then later on when it's resting, it will kind of like burp that stuff back up and it'll chew on it again and it'll swallow it again. And its stomach is able to process things a few different times to get the most energy out of it. When you think about getting your energy out of twigs, makes sense. But rabbits can't do that. So what they'll do is they'll eat something like maybe some bark off of some of the little brushes, the little brush and shrubs around here. And then they'll digest it as best they can and get some energy. And then they'll poop it out. And then if they think that that rabbit scat or that those droppings still have some energy in them, if they're like kind of green and not looking like dry sawdust, you guessed it, they'll eat it. So they'll eat their own scat and then they'll redigest it again that way. And then when it ends up looking like this little ball of just dry sawdust, then we know that it's gotten all of the energy out of it and it leaves those. So if you see Cocoa Puffs lying around in the woods, you probably don't want to munch on those. I always remember, sometimes people have a trouble remembering the difference between rabbit scat and deer scat, but rabbit scat is always round. So R for rabbit and R for round. And that's how I remember it. And they look like Cocoa Puffs. And deer scat are usually more oval shaped. And there's not usually like just one deer scat at a time, whereas rabbits, there's just one. There's big piles. We'll leave that there. If we look at the way that rabbits move, they're kind of cool. I'll show you some rabbit tracks if we find some, but this is an easier way to see. I have some sticks here. And if I use these sticks to represent their feet or their footprint or their track, it would look kind of like this. So I would have these big back feet, because a rabbit's back feet are bigger than its front feet. Okay, and they'd be kind of beside each other like that if I saw a track. And then I'd have these smaller front feet that are kind of like this. Okay, and that's what a rabbit track would look like with its 4 paw prints. Now the tricky part about this is figuring out which way the rabbit was going. A lot of the time it's really easy to make the mistake of thinking that it's going this way, so with the front feet in the front, so it's traveling this way. But this rabbit would actually be going that way with the back feet first. So when they leave a track behind, what happens is a rabbit will jump in the air and it'll land on its front feet. And then when it does, its back feet still keep on moving and they come around the front feet and they push off again. So when it hops, its front feet are actually behind its back feet as it pushes off, which is really cool if you see it. You would almost have to watch a rabbit in slow motion to see it happening though, because it happens so quickly. But if you're trying to figure out where a rabbit went, you want to follow the back feet. So the back feet are the front of the track for rabbits. The reason they have those big feet, you guys probably know about this, but it's so that they can run on top of the snow. So we actually have rabbits around here called snowshoe hares. And I think the idea of a snowshoe that people wear probably came from animals like that have big feet that can stay on top of the snow in the winter. So it makes it easy for them to get away from predators if they're being chased. All right, here's a good example of a rabbit track. So these are the back feet, the big back feet right here. And then here's the smaller front feet in the track right there. So this rabbit was going that way, even though its front feet are here as it goes. This is probably a cottontail rabbit, a pretty small one. This rabbit track here actually isn't much bigger than a gray squirrel track, like one of those big bushy-tailed squirrels that we see around. And if we wanted to figure out the difference, if it was a gray squirrel or a rabbit, if we weren't sure from the tracks, what we could do is we could track it for a while and follow them. And if it stopped at a tree, then we probably know it's a squirrel, right? Because they like to climb up the trees. The squirrels really don't like to spend a lot of time out running around in the wintertime because they're really easy to catch for hawks and things like that. Whereas rabbits will come out and they'll run into brush piles and things like that. And that's how they stay protected from those other birds and predators. All right, so this whole patch here is prickly ash. It's all this thorny bush that grows in this area. And most animals don't like going through it because they don't want to get pricked by these thorns as they go. But it's a favorite habitat for rabbits. They love going through it. And we can see that there's actually lots of rabbit tracks that run through here. And the reason is if you're a rabbit, it's pretty easy for you to hop around down at the base of all of these bushes. But if you're a bigger predator, like a coyote or something like that, you're going to get scratched in your face and maybe your eyes. And it's not a very safe place or a good place for you to run. So if rabbits can make it to a habitat like this, sometimes they have a better chance of getting away. They can deke their way through and run through. I'll show you what it looks like to a rabbit. So if up here, it's all thorny, as we get lower and lower and lower and lower, you'll see that the thorns kind of start to disappear. And then as you're a rabbit running through here, there's actually not a lot of thorns down at the base. So you can work your way through without getting prickled as you go. Okay? So that with being very fast. So rabbits are very fast, and being able to turn really quickly to get through here, and having really good camouflage makes this a perfect spot for a rabbit to live. It can run and hop safely around in here, and its coyotes and even hawks and things like that will have trouble getting it. So pretty smart if you're a rabbit. And with those big feet, it doesn't hurt either, so you can stay on top of the snow. So at first it seems kind of gross to talk about animal scat or animal droppings, and people think like, why would anyone in their right mind want to look at that gross stuff? But there's actually a few things that you can find out if you look at scat from the animals. A lot of the time the animals aren't around for us to see them and see how they're doing or what they look like, how big they are. But because they do leave signs behind, like the rubs that we saw in scat and stuff like that, we can tell how they're doing that way. So I usually find I can find a few things out. I can find out if the animal's healthy or not. So if its scat looks normal, I can usually figure out how big the animal is. So if it's like bigger droppings, usually it's from a bigger animal, especially with deer. You can tell if it's moving or not. So if it's like a long line of scat, you can tell that that animal was moving as it was dropping versus if it was a pile of it. Oh, the other thing is we can figure out what kind of animal it is. So just like they all leave different footprints behind, they all leave different scat behind too. So that's a good way to ID it. All right. Actually, we can see here there's a rabbit run. So the rabbits like to follow the same trail over and over again too. And you can see right here there's a path that goes underneath this fence where the rabbits are going. And you can tell that these rabbits were kind of moving along. And then you can tell some spots where they must have stopped for a little bit, where there's some little piles of those cocoa puffs or that round rabbit scat. All right, so we were lucky enough to find some deer scat, and you can see this scat's kind of funny. It's actually all clumped together. A lot of the time, male deer will leave behind scat that looks like that, but it's also not very big. The pellets are not like huge. They're not like big ovals, so we can tell it's also sort of a small deer too. Okay, so this is probably my guess, is that this is like a small male deer. Okay, but that's totally a guess. I'm no expert. Some cool things that I found about deer though is that because they are eating a diet of mostly just twigs during the winter time, like they don't have lots of green grass and really high energy foods, they have to eat all the time. So they're always walking along and eating and nibbling on little branches, and like you can see on this here, they're actually nibbling on the ends and just eating the buds off of all the new growth off the little shrubs as they go. And because they're eating and eating and eating constantly, they're going to the bathroom constantly as well. So some people say up to about 14 times a day they're leaving scat behind, which kind of makes sense. If you're eating all the time, it doesn't make sense for them to keep it in their body and to keep it warm, so they just let it go all the time. So we find piles of deer scat all over the place. We might find more. It has snowed recently, so we haven't found a whole lot today, but this is what we found so far. I always remember that deer scat looks like chocolate-covered raisins. Okay, so if rabbit was round and looked like Cocoa Puffs, then this is the chocolate-covered raisins that we find. All right, so you guys can probably figure out what this is. It's the foot from a deer. We found it in the woods, so I figured we'd chat about it a little bit, but you can see how pointy the feet are, and if you look at the bottom, you can see that's kind of how a deer track looks. And then if a deer wanted to, it could actually spread these hooves apart so it could get a better grip, but for the most of the time they walk with them like this. Okay, and if we look at the way it leaves a track here, you can see that their feet actually, because they're so pointy, they slip into the snow. They go in really, really easily. The other good thing about them being pointy, though, is that they can actually move really quickly, and they can get from place to place. They can jump around really quickly and get around obstacles if they're being chased. But in deep snow, they don't run very well. So this time of year, what a lot of deer will do is they'll get together and they'll get into groups. So when they travel, they'll just have one path going through the woods. It's called a deer run. And they'll all follow this one path, and it digs kind of a hallway through the snow. so that if they get chased by something, they have some nice shallow snow that they can run through and get away quickly. As opposed to trying to run through the deep snow where they can't run as fast. And their predators, like coyotes, have nice big feet that can run on top of the snow and get a better grip, so they would be able to catch them. Okay, in front of us, we're going to actually follow this deer run for a little bit, or this deer trail for a little bit. And you can see where all the deer have started using the same path over and over again to pack down the snow. So these are all deer tracks using the same trail, and they'll use this path all winter. You can see there's different size tracks. Some are really big deer, some are small ones. So the other thing to talk about with deer too is because they have those tiny little feet, when they get out on the ice, it's actually not very good for them. They can't run very well. They can't get a grip the same as other animals that have nails or claws when they run. So a deer out on like sheer ice, like flat black ice that we would like for skating, is actually really dangerous for the deer because it can slip and fall down, and it can't run away very fast if predators are trying to chase it. So they'll avoid ice like that. Sometimes what will happen though is predators like coyotes will get them and chase them out onto a place like that, and the coyotes with their toenails can get a better grip and they can run faster, and they have a better chance of catching up with the deer that way. But when it looks like this is a pond that's frozen, so there's ice here, but there's this nice sticky snow on top. This would actually be okay for the deer. They could probably move pretty well on this without slipping, but they'll still slip a little bit. There's an old movie, I don't know, maybe some of you have seen it, called Bambi, where Bambi goes skating with this rabbit named Thumper, and when they're out on the ice, Bambi falls down and spreads their legs out, and they have trouble getting up and learning to skate. But in real life, that kind of happens, except sometimes the deer get hurt when it happens, so it's not really fun for them. Okay, we found another cool little bit of deer sign here. You have a look at this one. So this right here is called a deer rub. And what deer will do is they'll come along with their antlers, and they'll rub their antlers on here, and they'll scrape the bark all off. And then sometimes what they'll do is they'll pee on it, which is kind of gross. Or they'll grab the branches from up top and pull those down and break them. But the other thing they'll do is they'll rub their eyebrows on it, and they have a gland in their eyebrow. And this gland just has like this smelly oil in it, so they'll rub that on there too. Deer are really, really good at smelling. So when another deer comes through, it can see that the first deer scraped this all up with its antlers, so it knows that there's a male deer around, and then it can smell that that deer has been coming back and rubbing its glands on it too, so it knows that that deer's in the area, and that's how they mark their territory. That's kind of like leaving a sign for the other deer to say, okay, I'm here, this is my area. And they'll leave like a lot of these rubs around if they're in an area that they kind of want to keep for themselves too, just to let the other deer know. So this is just a sign saying I'm here. Kind of cool. All right, we found one of my favorite ones. Snow has a lot of bacteria in it, and because of that, there are these little things called snow fleas that live in the snow. And when it gets warm enough, they hatch and they come out and they start eating that stuff. So I think I can show you here. If we look down in this deer track, all those little specks, you should be able to see some of them hopping and moving around. Pretty cool. The cool thing about snow fleas is that they have blood that's different than ours. Their blood doesn't freeze. It's like antifreeze blood. So they're kind of like a little superhero or a supervillain in that way, where they can't get stopped by being frozen in ice. Okay, we found some more rubs here just along the edge of the pond. These ones they're pretty small. They're probably from a smaller deer, and they're probably just to kind of leave a little signpost. The other reason that deer will rub on trees is when they grow their antlers. Antlers are actually one of the fastest known things that an animal of any kind can grow. So they grow faster than we can grow bones or toenails or hair or anything like that. They grow super, super fast. But when they grow, they need blood. So as a deer's antlers are growing, they'll be covered with this velvet. And then when they're done growing, they need to rub all that velvet off, and they'll polish their antlers so that they look like what we've seen, like those nice white antlers. So they'll find a tree to scrape that velvet off or that skin off, in the spring, and then they will actually start to like polish them and keep rubbing them so they get all nice and polished and white. But this one here, you can tell it wasn't very aggressive. There's still lots of little bits of bark hanging on here. It probably just scraped these up a little bit and then left some scent on them for other deer to know about, and then kept on moving. Kind of neat. So another thing to watch for, if you're trying to figure out what animals are in the area or where they are, is to watch for when they come in close contact with things like broken branches or bark or things like that. Sometimes they'll leave little clues behind, like little bits of fur. We have these fences at our place, and they're always a good sign because the animals will sometimes jump over the fences or sometimes go under them. But some animals like coyotes and deer will actually just walk right through them. And sometimes, if we're lucky, they'll leave some fur behind. You can see there's some here. So this is where a deer went through, and it just caught a little bit of its hair in this fence as it went through. They don't end up like cutting their skin or anything like that. They're pretty thick-skinned and they have thick fur, but sometimes they'll leave fur behind. They're pretty careful when they walk around. All right, we found something else really cool. We were following these deer tracks, and they head down into the woods. It was kind of neat because we were thinking about going to find some sheds. So every winter, deer antlers will break off, and if you're lucky, sometimes you can find them. So they grow new ones every year. But instead, what we found was this really cool otter slide. So if you find open water in the wintertime, there's a really good chance you're going to find otter tracks and maybe otter slides as well. So river otters like to eat fish like minnows and things like that, so they like to look for open water. But they're one of the only animals that are kind of like people, and they like to play in the wintertime. So they'll find a hill like this one, and you can see this smooth track with no footprints in it. It's because they'll get to the top of the hill and then they'll slide on their bellies, kind of like a penguin. And sometimes you'll see little footprints where they just push themselves along to keep going. And then when they get to the bottom, they'll go in the water, or they'll just come right back up and they'll slide down again, and they'll do that and have some fun. And they'll get together in groups and do it too. So it's actually really funny if you come across a group of otters that are out playing. I've seen them in the summertime before as well, and they'll do things like get a pebble or something from shore, and they'll swim out and they'll drop it, and then they'll swim down and get it again. And they're always chattering away and swimming around in groups. It's pretty funny to see. But you can see there's a little bit of open water down here. So we'll go a little bit closer and see if we can see a footprint. These otter slides are a few days old and they've been snowed on, but we might be able to find some footprints, or we might be able to find some otter scat too. So earlier when I said there was like 4 things you could figure out from scat, I said you could figure out what animal it was, and I said you could figure out how big the animal was, or if it was healthy. The other thing you can find out is what it's been eating. So if you look at what's in the scat, the theory being that if you can figure out what came out of the back end, then you'll know what went in the front end. And then you'll know where that animal's getting its food, so where it's doing its shopping for groceries, and then you can go there and you can find the animal. So if we were to find otter scat, we'd probably be looking for scat that is kind of the same size as a cat would leave behind, but it would be full of fish scales, because we know otters are eating lots of fish, and their body will digest up everything except for the scales, and that's what will get left behind. Go, otter, go!
I think I got stuck.
Right. So did any of you folks recognize our otter and our rabbit there?
Oh, I did.
He's a Perth rotor. He's a pain.
Yeah, I did.
Definitely.
He was my camera person and my helper. That's Ian. You guys meet him around.
He did an amazing job. And so anything else, Shawn, or we want to do a little questions, or?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, let's have at it.
Okay, so so guys, if any of you have any questions, feel free to put your real hand up or your virtual hand up. I can see some of you. Okay, so Mr. McGilvery, go ahead. So unmute yourself and you can ask a question.
You have a question, Doc? Okay. Did you unmute yourself?
What's that bunny thing?
Dominic?
The deer, like the little stuff in the snow, when they hatch, they're black.
Yeah, the snow fleas. They're called arthropods. They're little 6-legged things that are kind of like insects, but yeah, they live in the snow. And they hatch when you get warm weather, and they come out. They eat bacteria, and they also eat fungus and algae that's in the snow. So when we eat snow, we're eating that stuff too, but I don't think it hurts us too much.
Good job. Great question, Dominic. Mavi, do you have a question? If you do, unmute yourself and ask.
Like the little deer prints we saw.
Yep.
There's like that deer egg.
I missed you. Yeah, I think you're talking about the little deer prints.
Maybe
Yeah,
you just want some more.
Oh, yeah. Where we were hiking, there's lots of different size deer prints. Little small deer that are only like almost a year old, and then there's great big deer too. Sometimes when we see really big male deer, we'll see their normal hoof print like we saw there, and then you'll see 2 dots behind it as well.
Unmute yourself and ask a question.
It looks like the ones I just put in the chat.
Okay, well this is Chris. This is Lauren Murphy's dad. We wanted to ask a question. We live out on Leland Road. We're kind of in the middle of the Leland wetlands, and we came across a really cool footprint on the road just in front of our house. And I took a picture of it, and we think it might be a coyote, but it also might be a wolf. And I don't know how to share the screen very well, but that's a picture of my hand.
Yeah.
And I'm a pretty big. I got a pretty big hand, and then that's the. Do you have any ideas?
I don't know. Like if it's a wild dog, my guess would be it would have to be very big to be a coyote. They're a little bit more small and scraggly, those ones. But
Right.
yeah, it's pretty rare to see wolves this far south and around here, but every once in a while they are here, so it could be.
We do hear wolves. Like we have we have coyotes here regularly.
Yeah.
And they're kind of more of a yippee.
Yeah.
A yippee bark, I guess. But then we've also heard the really ow of a wolf. We've actually heard them kind of talking to each other.
Yeah. And I'll keep my ears out. I'm not too far from there either. I hear coyotes all the time as well. It seems to be more, but sometimes what I do, like a lot of the time I'll be in areas where there's other people, so I'll follow the tracks for a while, and that'll give you some other clues as well. So if you can figure out, first of all, how it's traveling, like if like dogs would travel and run around in circles, whereas coyotes and wolves like to go in a straight line. But if you can find scat, sometimes that's a good indication.
Oh, yeah.
You can find chips of bone and hair, and you know what it's eating.
Cool. Yeah, it walked about a kilometer or more right along the road, and then it veered off into the forest.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, or a trail cam. That might
Nice.
We have one. Yeah,
Awesome.
we've already caught a coyote once.
Yeah.
In the last couple of days.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Is that Eva Rankin? Do you have a question? I can see her holding something up, but I'm not sure if she's got a question or not. Or George? Can't see them anymore.
This is
Okay. Eva? Yeah. If they jump on, they jump on, and we'll let them go. But Jace, you have a question. Jace, unmute yourself and go ahead.
We actually have quite a few deer around here, and like we just killed the pigs not too long ago. And like when Chris laid those guts out there, they were very close.
Yeah.
Because we have like a field about this far away from our house.
Yeah.
And it's part of our property. And like he lays them out there, they get close. They go all the way down to our deer stand.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing goes to waste out in the woods.
Cool.
Actually, in that video where the deer leg came from, I think that was a hide and a leg from some hunters that left it in the woods. There was no guts or anything gross with it when I found it, but that's actually a lot better way to deal with it than just throwing it in the landfill or in the garbage, because all the animals will feast when you leave something like that out there, as long as it's not in an area where people's dogs will get it or there's a lot of people walking, like you wouldn't want to put it right on the trail or anything.
Like they were like the field was this far away from our house, and like I got scared. I don't like coyotes that close.
Yeah, they sound scary too.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, Lydia Stott, do you have a question? Lydia. I can see it's either, yeah, it must be Lydia.
What do snakes do in the snow?
Ha! They sleep. So snakes will actually go and hibernate. They'll find a spot to hide in the rocks, or sometimes underground if they can find a spot. And I don't know if you noted this, but snakes are cold-blooded, so they're not like us. Like if we go for a run, we get nice and warm, like mammals do that, but snakes don't. They have to warm up in the sun or find a nice warm rock to sit on. So when it starts to get cold, the snakes will start to slow down and they have to hibernate. So usually the bigger snakes have to hibernate first. They need kind of more heat to stay going, and they'll go and hibernate first. And then sometimes smaller snakes will go and they'll wrap around them and hibernate as well. So you can find this ball of snakes sometimes all sleeping together and hibernating. And then the little ones will wake up first because they warm up faster and they'll leave. And then the bigger ones will wake up later. It's really cool. It's the word for it is called Hiberniculum. So it's kind of like hibernating, but a group of snakes is called a Hiberniculum. And the biggest one that I have ever heard of is, you're not going to believe it, it's over 10,000 snakes in one. Yeah. It was out in Manitoba. And I heard they used it for this movie. Some of the grown-ups would know it. It's called Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they use snakes from there for it.
You say thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's okay then. Oh, good manners. I can't, so you're gonna have to raise virtual hands if anybody else has a question, because a lot of videos are coming on and off, or you could just jump on here if you want. Mavi, do you have another question or? No? Okay. All right. I don't see any other virtual hands. So I think we're good.
One thing I forgot to talk about that was kind of neat with this bear is that I learned a very cool thing about bears. So obviously they have the really cool teeth, but if you can look, I don't know if you can see inside there, but that empty space goes all the way back to about here in this bear's head. So more than half of this bear's head is actually used for smelling. So bears have a really, really good sense of smell. And this little bit back here, about the size of a tennis ball, is what it uses for its brain. So its brain is only about that big. Pretty small, eh? But bears can smell almost anything. They're really good at finding food that way.
All right. So actually, we do have a question on the chat from Hunter. Good idea, Hunter. It says, Shawn, are the Gould Lake trails open to take the kids for a walk right now?
Well, good question. I think they are. So as far as I know, the conservation area didn't close the conservation area or the conservation authority. The way it works, the Gould Lake Outdoor Centre, we just work for the school board and we lease that big barn that's out there and the portables. And then we just use their trail. So I think they leave it open for the public. And the last time I was there a few weeks ago, the road had been plowed, but you never know. Sometimes it's not sanded very well, so you might want to park at the gate or take it easy. But we're not really in charge of that part. But as far as I know, the trails are still open. It's still being used quite a bit.
Now, waiting very patiently with her hand up. Hopefully she can unmute herself. I think it is Alana. So Alana, if you can unmute yourself and you have a question, go ahead.
Why did you find that why did the deer leg fell off?
So I think
Good question.
that one could have been left behind by some hunters that were getting rid of the stuff that they weren't going to use, because you don't eat the legs. There's no meat on that part of it. Or it could have been from coyotes as well. So coyotes will, if they're lucky, they'll be able to take down a deer, and then they'll eat as much as they can until they're full, and they'll leave, and then they'll come back and they'll eat more, and then leave, and they'll just keep coming back until it's all gone. So sometimes we find the legs and the bits that aren't as meaty, because they haven't eaten them, they haven't come back to get them. But eventually, that was a little while ago. Eventually, that whole thing will be gone. All that hair, the chickadees and birds will use it for their nests, and all the meat that's on the legs and the bones and everything will get crunched up and used.
Another question too. And also, why were there little tiny balls?
Ooh, where was that?
The balls, why do they stick to?
Maybe she's talking about the scat.
Oh, I
I'm
think
not
so.
sure.
I don't know why they stick together. I don't know if it's because it's from a bigger animal or why that happens. But usually it's just in little pellets, and you see little piles of it. But yeah, sometimes they stick together in big clumps. And from what I've noticed is a lot of the time that's from the big male deer that happens.
This is so cool because even as grown-ups, we're learning lots of things like the Hiberniculus. Is that what it was called? Yeah. And Mrs. Croth in the chat, she put down too, she didn't realize about the snow fleas. So lots and lots of grown-ups are learning here too. Now, one of the hands that up says it's Nevea Mundell. So I think that's a brother or sister. I think maybe Mr. Dobek could help me out here. Who's that?
That's Violet. It's Violet.
Okay, so go ahead.
But you can't go like.
Okay, Violet, do you have a question?
You have to keep your arm off the.
Okay, done.
Keep it on the board.
Oh.
I'm not sure.
You need now. Mute yourself.
Yeah, go ahead, Violet. So I'm not sure. Oh, Violet, if you've got a question or whoever that is, go ahead. You're unmuted. You're good to go. Nope, now they've muted themselves again. Yeah, I don't know. So if that is Violet, give it a try one more time. I like how patient everyone's waiting here.
This is my.
There we go.
Oh, cool. That would be from a pretty big.
Oh. Nice. Nice. Steve, Mr. Dobek confused me. He had a different Violet last year. Now I get now.
One thing I probably should mention, even though all this stuff is really cool, like these bones and furs and all that kind of stuff, you guys think it's probably not a great idea to just go picking that stuff up, right? When you're out there. Or if you do, like maybe check in with a grown up or like wear some gloves and make sure you wash your hands and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we cannot possibly wash our hands too much. Just wash, 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 especially, well, anytime actually, but especially if you're touching those bones out there.
Yeah. Oh, look at that skull.
All right.
It's a great one.
Yeah. Cool stuff, guys. Oh, wow. That's Hunter. Hunter's got, yeah, I can see that. The antlers and stuff like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Nice. Nice. All right. I think we're getting close to that time. And I don't see any more hands. So I just want to, on behalf of everyone, say thanks to Shawn. So everyone, do not unmute yourselves, but maybe give Shawn a clap.
Thanks very much.
Amazing.
Thank you guys. That was really fun. Thanks for having me.
That was really good. That was good for my soul, seeing so many faces from both classes and having so many people on here. It was awesome. I think everyone kind of needed that. So that was great, Shawn.
Yeah, maybe we'll pop in for another visit soon.
Anytime for sure. Okay, guys. So if you're a Lloyd and you have time at 1:55, Miss Brooks is